Hey, thanks for watching. Yeah, after the last three videos, just kind of talking about my story, like how I've come to like say cope with having a personality disorder. I mean, really just coping. I mean, it's pretty clear that what I've done. I mean, I haven't like say if having a personality disorder is like having a broken leg. I mean, I haven't fixed the leg. The leg is still broken. I've just come up maybe with the way to sort of calm down and maybe find some good crutches, or maybe even like a wheelchair. Like what I've done is like coming up with a wheelchair that lets me get around without the broken leg, but the leg is still broken, you know. And sometimes I really wonder, like, I just I don't feel satisfied with what psychology has come up with to explain the personality disorders. I mean, maybe from a distance, superficially, they have it down pretty clear, but there's got to be a story underneath what's going on, and some reason why you know when people go through therapy or they go through recoveries. I mean, there's always some sense that some big underlying issue is not really getting fixed, and maybe it never will get fixed, but somehow we're just not addressing what's really maybe going on. So in this video, I just want to talk about an issue that I didn't think I was going to make this video, because really I'd rather just talk about maybe some cool true crime stories, or look at cluster B in the real world. But really, I do want to talk about the two issues, which is the supposed lack of shame, or shame expressed in a strange way. I don't know. People talk about NPD as being kind of like having to do with shame. I don't disagree with that at all. Actually, there may I do think shame is actually a big issue, and also just the question of having inappropriate emotions, or lack of empathy, whatever. I think to me the whole empathy thing is kind of it's got to be part of a bigger. It's got to be the tip of an iceberg, a bigger iceberg that we're not talking about. Because it just can't be. I don't believe in like isolated things like, oh, no empathy. Probably, I think it's got to be a big iceberg, and these are just the pieces that are sticking out. You know, at least that's the way I think it should. I mean, I just can't believe that we're just they're just like these disembodied, little features that just show up in space. Oh, lack of empathy, whatever. Um, and of course, I'm still going to say that I think empathy is a very very poorly defined term, and I think it's a term that's meant to have like political thrust. It's like a political statement that kind of like a badge. And when a word takes on that kind of talismanic, sort of badge significance, I don't think that the meaning is too loaded with some kind of political intent. So anyway. Um, I haven't really thought about much, actually, what it means. I mean, I haven't really thought about NPD that much. I focus more on just trying to calm down and just try to develop a very effective, way of just coping in life, just to be more functional. I really haven't wanted to think too much about my personality. I guess my recovery has involved not thinking about it, and just calming down and becoming functional, and that may um, but I do have to admit that if I really think about it, I do have a shame, deep down inside, a real, very very kind of hard to describe. It's like a very all-encompassing kind of a shameful sort of like a frozenness, like I've been frozen, like I've been like bowed down to the point of being like shame to like non-existence, and it's almost unthinkable for me to like present my true deformity. I feel like there's like a deformity in me, and I'm like really afraid to present that. And in fact, I just don't think about it, because I know I'm not gonna get anywhere thinking about that. It's just too terrible, I guess. But I'm gonna go ahead and say, now that I am kind of thinking about it, I just want to say some things that do occur to me. And I think that um, because, at least in my case, as a person who has personality disorder, and I think other people who have, let's say, behavioral problems, or just kind of like the kind of things that make you an outcast or make you an outlaw, outcast, outlaw, somebody who's not accepted, and you just kind of know it on the inside. I think that as humans, I think we know, like I was talking about in these last few videos, how we have like these like witchcraft elements that like compose like they're kind of like the elemental features of our reactive personality, um, and these are just kind of like the kind of things that would make you have different mental operations. Okay, so like say I can have a mental operation where I make things seem far away, or I can have a mental operation where I make things seem very important. I can have a mental operation where I see other people as below, like inferior. I can have another mental operation where I see people above and intimidating. Okay, these are like perspective shifting, lensing operations that are like mental intelligences inside inside the mind. We all have them, but I do think that. Oh, and then there's also the one where you can like flood the brain, intimidate. You know, like say turn up the intensity, which can scare people, or it can sort of like, or even charisma. Like your charisma can sort of like capture attention. These are all just like little separate compartmentalized intelligences that compose, like say, the crafty brain, the reactive survival brain. There are probably other intelligences that allow a person naturally to know how to hunt an animal. You don't have to read a book. You could just kind of know how to be slow around a lizard to catch the lizard, or how to, when you see a fly, to kind of whatever. These are just like our native geniuses, really. Um, and I mean, all kinds, the kind of things that make you smile, make you laugh. I mean, they're all built in. You don't have to read a book to know how to smile. You're born knowing how to smile. And so all these are like little component intelligences that come together to form, basically the reactive personality. So basically, I believe, okay, from my experience, that all these different components come together and they form a kind of they come together to make like a form of our personality. And I think that they either come together kind of in a harmonized fashion, or maybe they don't harmonize and they're kind of disharmonized. Okay, so I personally believe that there is kind of a program that's already running in our inherited value system. Okay, where just like when you see a person who looks classically ugly, we have a certain reaction to people who look deformed or ugly. It's just a built-in reaction. You could be 4 years old and you never read a book. Your parents never taught you anything. But when you see somebody who has a deformed face, you're gonna be scared. It's like the thing in us that makes us afraid of spiders, whatever. Um, it's maybe another one of our components. We have a component among our witchcraft faculties, let's say, our geniuses, that is programmed to have a fear reaction, to be afraid of things that are misshapen, not well put together, bad proportions, lack of harmony, whatever, or the harmony is not quite right. So um, my concern is that you see it in the history of kind of like non-pagan civilizations, and their tendency and their attitudes towards pagans. The pagans are more wild, they're more sort of like chaotic, and so maybe in our Western civilization, and maybe all throughout the world, we've developed kind of like maybe a hyper civilization that has become especially intolerant of, like, say, wildness. I mean, we were probably always programmed to have a fear and a disgust with, like, real gross abnormalities and gross, lack of proportion or bad disharmonies, like say in the way we appear. There's probably been a sense of what an ugly person is even way before our hyper civilization. But the thing is, I think with hyper civilization, we've become even more. Our standard has become even more refined to expect a very kind of a perfect form, sort of a good balance of all the elements, and that in the hyper civilization, even a let's say a non-pathological or a non-deformed pagan person would appear a little too rough, in their call it their composition, you know. And I guess I'm just proposing that just like we have a reaction to how people look physically, we also have an instinctive reaction to how the different genius elements, the different witchcraft elements that compose, like say, the personality, the reactive personality, those elements, how they come together. If we can sense a kind of a disharmony or a lack of stability or kind of a imbalance, that does unconsciously, it provokes in us kind of like a fear and a disgust, you know. So that so that maybe in the hyper civilization, you know, and this may be just a byproduct of our struggle to move away from even paganism, you know, that we become like hyper consolidated into a really, really very, very uniform ideal, you know, of a super harmony, and things have to be really tight, really jacketed, really, you know, really kind of on point, you know. And so there's probably just a lot of people who, when you look at, they just don't, they don't reach, they're not born up to the standard of what today's ideal is for a solid, put together, you know, balanced person. And so if you have inside of yourself, if you know that your, let's say your personality components are sort of like not well organized and put together, maybe we have inherited the hyper civilized judgment standard, you know. And so we, deep down inside, even as a very young person, we sort of have like a self-loathing because it's been inherited into us by the civilized standard for what is beauty, what is, let's say, beauty of the personality, you know. So it's almost like there's a personality dysmorphia that's been inherited in our civilized progress, you know. And so and that's reinforced because it gets enacted in active society, because when you're in kindergarten, if you're not, you know, kind of like an acceptable form physically and in personality, the other kids are just going to kind of treat you differently. So it gets reinforced. But let's say if you belong to a family that's kind of weird, you notice that your parents don't have a lot of friends, and you kind of sense the marginalization. It all just gets reinforced, you know, the standard. And so that can produce, I think, in people, especially if you have really difficult in balancing your personality components. And so that can produce you know, an intense loathing, and then society kind of reinforces by sort of kind of marginalizing or mistreating, you know. And so I can see how at some point, you know, deep down inside that you're loathsome, you know. And you know, I don't even know how to put that into words because it's so terrible that I just kind of don't think about it. But in the end, I can tell that I'm kind of stooped and kind of humbled down, you know, to the point where I think the shame is so intense that it's no longer something you could express with tears or with regular feelings. You're so suppressed that it's almost like you're seized and you're frozen by the taboo. You know what I mean? To the point where you no longer have regular. You've been so your throat has been so squeezed out, you know, with that shame, that you're just squeezed into almost like a soul death. Like they put you into like a, they make your soul die a little bit, you know, so much that you're not even left with live feelings. You know what I mean? So it is kind of like a collective societal hyper civilized agreement that will just soul crush, you know, the people that are so far out, and they'll do it to themselves because we have it in ourselves, that standard, you know. So I just think that probably it's beyond the point where you could have normal feelings about it, because your soul has sort of been told to just crunch and just die, basically, you know, sort of mangle yourself and just kind of be a nothing. And then, you know, from there, with whatever residual personality you have, if you want to just be a janitor and you want to just be a quiet guy, keeps your mouth shut and just drive a taxi, well, that's okay. But just your personality the flower has been crushed, you know. So anyway, you know, I don't have a solution to that, but I think it's important that we don't forget that there may be some historical, long historical, societal, cultural, hyper civilized operations that we also have inside of us, you know, that are meant to deal with being very deformed, you know. And so I think looking toward any future, we have to be honest about that, and you know, try to try to face it however we can, and just, with as much honesty as we can. Thanks.